Only after reviewing the hive's internal structure twice did I realize how the honeycomb itself isn't just a nursery or pantry. It's a living amplifier for those subtle vibrations bees use to communicate in pitch, darkness.
That's right. The open combs in wild hives actually enhance the transmission of the waggle dance's 250 to 300 Hz signals, while the framed combs in commercial setups can dampen those same frequencies, making it harder for bees to pick up crucial foraging cues.
But if the hive is crowded and noisy, how do the bees avoid getting their messages lost? Wouldn't all that background vibration mask the signals?
Great question. The bee's Johnston's organ, which sits in the antennal pedicel, is packed with over 300 scolopidea, each tuned to that specific frequency range. This setup allows them to filter out irrelevant noise, but their neural circuits can still be overwhelmed if external sounds overlap with the dance frequencies.
Here's the takeaway. The honeybee's auditory system achieves dynamic range compression, letting them detect both faint and strong signals. But it's a delicate balance. Too much external vibration, and the whole communication network gets disrupted.
So, if commercial hives are dampening those signals, could that actually affect how efficiently bees find food or warn each other about threats?
It's possible. Studies have shown that when the comb's natural resonance is altered, bees may miss out on key information, which could impact foraging success and even colony health.
What surprised me most was realizing that the relentless hum from data centers isn't just background noise for us. It could be a hidden disruptor for entire ecosystems. This is Signal and Static, where we untangle the unseen impacts of our digital world.
If you look at the regulatory side, most noise standards are based on A-weighted decibel scales, which are tuned to human hearing. But honeybees, for example, detect vibrations at much lower frequencies well below what we notice. There's a real mismatch between what's measured and what's actually happening in the environment.
So, are there studies showing that bees really change their behavior around these data centers? Or is it just a theory right now?
There's emerging evidence. A 2022 field study in Germany found that honeybee foraging patterns shifted near industrial noise sources, with reduced waggle dance activity. That's a key way bees communicate food locations, so even subtle masking could ripple through pollination cycles.
Here's the takeaway. If bee communication gets scrambled, it's not just a problem for the hive. It could mean less pollination, lower crop yields, and a hit to food security. The digital hum isn't just an annoyance, it's an ecological variable we can't afford to ignore.
But why haven't regulators factored in non-human hearing at all? Is it just because it's harder to measure, or is there another reason?
Partly, it's technical. Most environmental noise laws were written decades ago, before we had this scale of digital infrastructure. Plus, measuring impacts on insects or birds requires a different toolkit and more research funding. But as the data center footprint grows, those gaps in policy become more urgent.
Only after 2 iterations of reviewing the neural data did it become clear. The same frequency range that powers industrial cooling systems is exactly what honeybee antennae and their primary auditory centers are tuned to. That overlap isn't just a coincidence, it's a vulnerability.
That's striking, because the waggle dance signal sits right at 250 Hz, which falls squarely within the 2500 Hz band of most data center noise. The evidence shows that when this background hum is persistent, interneurons in the bee's brain experience tonic inhibition or overstimulation, which could block the dance's message entirely.
But is there any indication that bees can adapt if the noise is always there? Like, do they ever shift their signal frequency or change how they dance to get around the masking effect?
So far, the research suggests adaptation is limited. The bee's sensory hardware, the antennae, and the pack are evolutionarily tuned to those frequencies for a reason. Chronic exposure doesn't seem to shift their range, and masking persists unless the noise drops below a certain threshold, which hasn't been precisely defined yet.
Here's the takeaway. If the industrial noise remains above that undefined threshold, the risk isn't just confusion during a single dance. It's a chronic communication breakdown, which could cascade into reduced foraging efficiency and ultimately threaten colony survival.
So even if just one data center is nearby, the colony could be at risk long-term. Or is there a safe distance where the noise fades enough for bees to communicate normally?
Distance does help, but low-frequency noise travels surprisingly far. Without clear data on the exact masking threshold, it's hard to guarantee safety unless the source is eliminated or heavily insulated.
Only after 2 iterations of fan redesign did engineers realize the blade passing frequency was still landing squarely in that 100 Hz range, right where both human annoyance and bee sensitivity overlap.
That's the tricky part. Even when you switch from axial to centrifugal fans, you're still dealing with sound power levels that are stubbornly high, below 500 Hz. For example, a typical industrial chiller can emit over 85 decibels at 125 Hz, which is tough to dampen with standard barriers.
Can you explain why those low frequencies are so much harder to block? I mean, if you add more insulation, shouldn't that help?
Here's the catch. Low-frequency sound waves have much longer wavelengths, think several meters, so they pass right through most walls and even vibrate the ground. That's why traditional noise abatement, like acoustic panels, works well for higher pitches but barely dents the hum.
Plus, the non-directional nature of these vibrations means you can't just put up a wall and expect the problem to disappear. The energy couples into the ground and spreads, which is especially problematic for creatures like honeybees that sense vibrations through their legs.
So, if you're designing a new data center, is there any way to avoid this trade-off between cooling efficiency and environmental impact?
Engineers can tweak fan blade counts to shift the blade passing frequency out of the most sensitive range, or use variable speed drives to avoid resonance peaks. But every adjustment comes with a cost either in cooling performance, energy use, or upfront investment.
And sometimes, the solution is just moving the facility farther from sensitive habitats, because the physics of low-frequency noise make total elimination nearly impossible with current technology.
Only after 2 iterations of reviewing Franklin County's noise ordinance did I realize the 60 dBA daytime limit barely touches the frequencies bees actually use to communicate.
That's because the dBA scale is designed to mimic human hearing, filtering out almost everything below 500 Hz, yet bees rely on those low frequencies for their waggle dances and hive coordination.
But if a data center is blasting out low-frequency hums, and it still passes the dBA test, how can regulators claim the environment is safe for pollinators?
Here's the takeaway. Measuring sound pressure with A weighting gives a false sense of security. The real risk is in particle displacement, which isn't even on the radar for most local ordinances.
For context, a study from 2022 showed that bee colonies exposed to sub-500 Hz vibrations had up to 30% reduced foraging efficiency, even when dBA readings stayed under legal limits.
So why haven't standards shifted to Z-weighted or vibration-based metrics if the science is this clear? Is it just about cost, or is there more resistance from industry or policymakers?
It's partly technical. Most environmental noise meters aren't set up for Z-weighting or direct vibration measurement, but there's also a political hurdle. Changing standards means rewriting compliance rules and possibly retrofitting existing infrastructure.
If we want regulations that actually protect ecosystems, not just human comfort, agencies need to rethink both what they measure and how they define safe noise. Only after 2 iterations with the LDV setup did the team realize that RMS velocity, not just decibels, was capturing the real vibrational impact on the hive structure. That shift changed the entire data interpretation.
That's crucial, because decibels alone can miss the subtleties of how vibrations travel through comb material. For instance, in the rural control hives, RMS velocity readings were consistently below 0.1 millimeters per second, but near data centers, they spiked above 0.4 millimeters per second during peak server loads.
But if the lab masking tests show follower success rates dropping from 32% to under 10% with synthetic noise, how do we know those numbers translate to real-world hives? Isn't there a risk that lab conditions oversimplify what bees actually experience?
That's a valid concern. The field studies try to bridge that gap by comparing hives in noisy and quiet environments. But there's always the challenge of controlling for confounding factors like weather or hive health.
And establishing a biological baseline is tricky too. The 32% success rate in natural conditions isn't a universal constant. It varies with colony age, forager experience, even time of day. That's why repeated measures and large sample sizes matter.
If the results are so context-dependent, how can policymakers use this data? Wouldn't it be risky to set regulations based on lab simulations that might not capture every variable?
Here's the takeaway. While lab and field methods each have limitations, combining them gives us a more nuanced picture of acoustic masking. The next step is refining these protocols so that policy decisions rest on robust, ecologically valid evidence. Only after 2 iterations of monitoring hive activity did researchers notice that colonies exposed to persistent low-frequency vibration started showing erratic foraging patterns and reduced brood care. That's a clear sign the stress isn't just short-term agitation, it's systemic.
That matches what I've seen in the data. Colonies subjected to 380 Hz vibration, even at moderate intensity, display a marked increase in behavioral freezing. In one study, over 60% of worker bees stopped moving for extended periods, which directly undermines their ability to feed larvae and maintain hive temperature.
But if the bees are freezing up, does that mean the queen is more likely to be replaced? Or is that just a side effect of the stress?
It's more than a side effect. Chronic vibration can mimic the vibrational cues bees use to signal emergencies, so workers may interpret these false signals as a sign the queen is failing. That triggers queen supersedure, even when the queen is healthy. The result is social instability and, often, a failed replacement.
Here's the takeaway. Once a colony enters that cycle of misinterpreted signals and queen turnover, recovery becomes much harder. The stress compounds, leading to sleep deprivation and poor feeding, which are both precursors to collapse.
Is there any evidence that colonies can bounce back if the noise stops? Or is there a point where it's just too late?
Some studies suggest that if the exposure is brief and the queen remains viable, colonies can recover normal rhythms within a few days. But with chronic exposure, especially over several brood cycles, the damage to social structure and circadian regulation may be irreversible.
That's why intervention matters. Beekeepers can use vibration-dampening hive stands or relocate colonies away from industrial sites. But if policymakers don't address the broader noise pollution, we risk widespread ecological fallout. Pollination networks depend on healthy, stable hives.
Only after 2 iterations of presenting noise data to the Franklin County Planning Board did we realize how much resistance there is to changing the standard decibel metrics. The pushback wasn't just technical, it was political too.
That's a crucial point. The current reliance on A-weighted decibel measurements systematically underestimates the low-frequency noise that actually disrupts pollinator behavior. For example, Z-weighted assessments capture the full spectrum, including those problematic 250 Hz and 380 Hz harmonics.
But if the data is so clear, why aren't more municipalities requiring vibrational monitoring at site boundaries? Is it just cost, or is there something else holding them back?
It's partly budget, but also a lack of regulatory precedent. Most environmental impact assessments still focus on human health thresholds, not the sublethal effects on bees or other pollinators. Without baseline biological audits before new data centers go up, we're missing the chance to spot declines early.
And the ethical dimension can't be ignored. If we accept that ecological networks underpin food security, then failing to account for non-human health in our regulations is a form of negligence. Scientific testimony can shift the conversation, but only if policymakers are willing to listen.
So, would frequency-specific abatement like targeting those 250 Hz and 380 Hz harmonics make a measurable difference? Or is it more symbolic at this stage?
There's solid evidence from controlled studies. When those frequencies are reduced, pollinator foraging rates recover by up to 18%. It's not just symbolic, it's actionable if the will is there.
Here's the takeaway. Meaningful noise regulation for pollinator protection demands Z-weighted assessments, mandatory vibrational monitoring, and frequency-specific abatement, plus baseline biological audits before new projects break ground. The lesson is bigger than bees. Every urban expansion is a chance to rethink what we value in our shared environment. Thanks for listening, and if you found this useful, share it with someone who cares about the future of our ecosystems.